Good morning. I am Raymond Eveleigh and I am a retired Anglican clergyman. I would like to take this opportunity to present a series of talks, discussions, question time about some of the theological issues facing the world these days. Particularly I want these to be short and relevant. I don't want to be answering questions that are being asked by no one. It's an opportunity for you to maybe think about and question things that you wouldn't normally have time to dwell on. I know you must know the story of the king with the magnificent suit of clothes, a story by Hans Christian Andersen, in which the king was in the habit of parading through the streets of his kingdom with cheering crowds, wearing a magnificent suit of clothes and a long magnificent cloak. The people cheered and waved their flags, and all was well, until one day a small boy raised the question, "I don't think the king has any clothes on," he said. "In fact, the king is as naked as the day that he was born." Well, one by one the crowd realized that he was in fact right, and the king was naked. So they joined in. The king is naked, naked as the day that he was born. Well, I can't help thinking that the king himself would be quite relieved, perhaps, that at last people would know him as he really is. He might have found that quite liberating. The importance of questions that sometimes lead to great revelations. A very dear friend of mine, Tom Willis, who was a vicar in Hull many years ago in a church called St. Paul's Sculcoats. Later in life, Tom was also vicar of a church in Bridlington, Holy Trinity, I think. Anyway, Tom, on this occasion, invited his church council around the church to, as it were, have a meditation on the purpose of his ministry. So he took them first of all to the font and explained the importance of baptism, how it was that the church was always welcoming new people to join, become members of the church. And then he took them to the pulpit and explained how important the teaching was to spread the teaching of Jesus in these days. And then he took them to the lectern, where the Bible is read every Sunday, and explained the importance of the scriptures, how wonderful it is that we have, for example, the letters of St. Paul, written many, many years ago, and we have them available to be read today. And then he took them at last to the altar and explained the value of spiritual growth, spiritual nourishment, and how important the communion service was. But also how important for people getting married to kneel before the altar and pray for their future. After this little tour, Tom took them into the vestry, where they had a cup of tea and some soggy biscuits, as is the custom. And then Tom invited questions. And after a deadly silence, one lady had the courage to put her hand up and say, "Yes, Vicar, I have a question. Who is it that keeps leaving the tap on in the vestry?" well, not to be too unkind to the lady, she at least had the courage to ask a question. Many years ago, when I was a teacher of mathematics in the college in Hull, at the end of a lecture, I invited questions. As any teacher knows, this is always a threatening time. Students will either be deadly silent, in which case you know they've understood nothing, or they've understood everything, you just don't know. But on this occasion, an Iraqi student raised his hand and said, "Mr. Eveleigh, are you a Christian?" Somewhat embarrassed by the question, which was completely out of context, I said, "Yes, I am. I am a Christian." He said, "Well, why are you not a Muslim like I am?" Well, I thought this is not the time or the place for this discussion, so I invited him to my study afterwards, and there we had a very long and interesting conversation. He was a very sincere practicing Muslim and questioned the whole idea of human sacrifice. And that's how he described what we call the sacrifice of Christ. Because I said, well, Jesus died for my sins. Isn't this human sacrifice, he said. Well, there again, a question raised which really radically challenged my previous idea of the meaning of the crucifixion of Christ. So, questions are very, very important. And I hope that in the coming weeks you will take the opportunity, if you wish, to put some questions on Facebook, on the Cornflakes Theology group, the Cornflakes Theology group, and place your questions there, and I'll do my best to explore them. I can't promise to answer them, but I will explore them with you and maybe give us an opportunity for reflection and meditation, maybe. Thank you for listening. Goodbye for now.